Everyone wants to be in the cyberpunk world, right? Like, they want to be in, like, the Blade Runner cyberpunk city where we're just, like, walking around with the trench coat and it's raining and it's like, oh my God, what is going on? The problem is that the cyberpunk city, eventually the sun comes up and it actually turns out to be a theme park. And then every other guy you see is also wearing a trench coat trying to be that one guy. There's going to be like a 500-pound black guy trying to be fucking Harrison Ford too. There's going to be like a Mexican guy. There's going to be a Mexican Harrison Ford. There's going to be a 12-year-old Harrison Ford with his dad and his whole family's there, including his grandma who's complaining about the weather. And everyone's going to be walking around the cyberpunk city, like trying to capture the essence of this until they realize you have a collective responsibility for your fantasies. You're not alone in these fantasies you have. There's a level of collective responsibility for this fantasy. You want to be Harrison Ford in Blade Runner. You want to be Ryan Gosling. You want that so bad, but so does everyone fucking else. So you gotta ask yourself the question, why do we want this dark, shitty world so much? Right? And then you realize the whole dark, shitty world is a fucking fantasy itself. That's the ultimate utopia. The sobering realism is that we just live in communism. The fantasy is Harrison Ford in Blade Runner. That's the actual libidinal fantasy of a satisfaction of our desires. Everyone wants to be a dark, emo angel. Back off, I'll take you on. Oh no, I'll take on anyone. I know that you are wrong. This is not where you belong. The darkness inside me is... Everyone wants that, you know? Because they're a bunch of fucking babies who can't take responsibility for, like, huge mega construction mining projects to keep the fucking lights on in the first place, you fucking baby. It's like, this is the truth. Imagine that theme park, right? Imagine that theme park, and then it's in the middle of the desert, and in the background, it's a bunch of, like, cheap Mexican migrant labor workers working really hard to, like, keep the city running. There's, like, underground tunnels for, like, service workers to, like, shift through. And there's, like, it's such, like, a pain in the ass to keep this stupid, childish fantasy going. Whereas in reality, it would be a lot more realistic and utilitarian to just have, like, a normal city, you know? Like, in reality, a normal city would be way easier to maintain. But because they want it to be a dark, brooding, cyberpunk world where I can be Harrison Ford, walking in the rain, looking around, what's going on? That's even more effort to maintain that. But we have to do it because these guys have this fantasy that we have to, like, we have to, like, give them what they want. Do you know how gay that is? That's the same shit as, like, a childish like, this is what we do for children. For our kids, we build a fort, or, like, we tell a story, or I don't fucking know. We make them feel like they're living in a fantasy so that our kids will be happy, and then they have to fucking grow up and get a job, right? But now we have a population of people who think that they're, like, this main character, but it's actually a fucking fantasy, and, like, there's this expectation that everyone has to keep it up. So everyone should just really be mindful to be responsible for your fantasy. That's all I'm saying. Be responsible for your fantasy. Understand that it's a fantasy. It's not real life. But a lot of people watch Cyberpunk, where they play the game Cyberpunk, and they're like, this is such a cruel realism. This is the true cruelty of the cold, hard world. And in reality, it's a very warm fantasy that has to be attended to in a very motherly and caring basis to keep the fantasy of a cold, brutal world going.